On June 30th, my sister decided to make the only correct choices in episode 1 of season 1 of the Walking Dead games, and for that her face will be mutilated further than necessary.
Those were the words of 19-year-old Nicholas Prosper, spoken directly into the camera, calm, unemotional. Moments later, police were called to a flat in Luton, England. Inside, they found 3 bodies, a mother and her 2 children. No sign of forced entry, no struggle. To those who knew the family, it made no sense, until they found the video. Nicholas Prosper barely existed in the real world. Born on December 18th, 2005, he had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and was often described as quiet and geeky, with a strong interest in computers. He lived with his mother and 2 younger siblings and spent nearly all of his time online. In an era where that isn't unusual, Nicholas took it further. He rarely left the house. He had no job, no social life, no presence beyond the walls of his home. To some of his neighbours, he may as well have been invisible. Some didn't even know he lived there. For a while, he had friends, a small group he would spend time with, like any other teenager. But as the years passed, those friendships faded, and Nicholas faded with them. He became withdrawn, cutting himself off from the outside world. His life was no longer about the people around him. It was about what was on his screen. At one point, he was banned from a website that documented graphic content after posting comments that appeared to defend or promote adult-child relationships. There's no evidence that he acted on these beliefs in person, but online, his behavior became increasingly disturbing. And soon, one person became his entire world. Clementine, a fictional character, an 8-year-old girl from the Walking Dead video game. To most players, she was just part of the story. But to Nicholas, she was something else entirely. He called himself her follower, said he had been chosen, guided.
I am the chosen one, chosen by Clementine. I am guided, as Christians are guided by Jesus Christ. And there will be no more killings of Larrys in front of Clementine, no more killings of St. John's in front of Clementine. And overall, Clementine's content will be preserved, maximised. That's the message I want to give out.
And that belief only grew stronger when his sister, Giselle, played the game herself and made a decision Nicholas couldn't accept. There's a moment in The Walking Dead where a character suffers a heart attack. He's dying, and there's no way to save him. The player is given 2 options: try to help, or end his life. Giselle chose the second option. She killed him. To most players, that choice is just part of the narrative. But in the game, it leaves a lasting impression on Clementine. Her character is visibly shaken by it. And to Nicholas, that mattered. He became fixated, obsessed. And when he eventually spoke about it, he didn't talk about the game. He talked about punishment. By April 2024, he had joined a legal gun sales website, and 3 months later began researching how to forge a firearms certificate. Around the same time, he started looking into his former primary school, St. Joseph's Catholic Primary, and began planning an attack. In August, Nicholas made his first attempt to buy a gun, but it fell through. Later that month, he contacted another seller, paying £650 for a shotgun and 100 cartridges, along with £30 for fuel. Then, Nicholas decided on a date. Friday, September 13th, 2024. The plan had been to wait until his family was asleep and carry out the killings quickly enough that no one would notice. From midnight until around 4:30 a.m., Nicholas stayed online, continuing his research and watching extreme animated content. He loaded the shotgun. The first round he fired was a test shot, aimed at a teddy bear in his bedroom. But things didn't go according to plan. His mother, Juliana, woke up earlier than expected. She saw Nicholas holding the gun. A struggle followed. Juliana tried to fight back and sustained defensive wounds before she was shot in the head at close range. Her body was later found in the hallway. Giselle had also woken up. Nicholas fired at her, grazing the back of her head. She ran into the living room and tried to hide under the dining table. He followed her, took aim, and shot. Kyle, his younger brother, ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and tried to defend himself. Nicholas shot him in the chest from a distance, then attacked him more while he begged for his life. Despite his injuries, Kyle managed to escape into the hallway, but Nicholas reloaded and fired a final shot to his head. Neighbors later said they heard shouting, banging, and the sound of someone groaning before a loud gunshot. One of them went to the door to complain, but turned back after hearing the noise. Nicholas was seen on CCTV leaving the flat at 5:33 a.m. Police arrived by 5:50 and entered the flat at 6:08. Inside, they found the bodies of Juliana, Kyle, and Giselle, along with multiple bloodied knives and evidence of the struggle. A copy of the novel How to Kill Your Family was found placed on Juliana's body. The person responsible was nowhere to be found. But this wasn't where it was supposed to end. Nicholas had intended to walk straight to St. Joseph's Primary. He had a loaded shotgun, 33 cartridges, and a uniform he planned to wear during the attack. Everything had been timed. But now, with the noise drawing attention and the school likely on lockdown, he abandoned the plan. He left the area and disappeared. Nicholas fled on foot, but eventually hid in a nearby wooded area for over 2 hours. During that time, he shared his pre-recorded video and disposed of 2 mobile phones, hoping to erase evidence of conversations he'd had with a group he claimed to be protecting. Eventually, he left the woods and was spotted by officers who noticed his behavior. They approached and quickly realized they had found the person responsible. He was arrested without resistance. On February 24th, 2025, Nicholas Prosper stood in Luton Crown Court and pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder, along with all other charges brought against him. There was no trial, no attempt to justify what he had done, and on March 19th, Nicholas Prosper was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 49 years. But long before that moment in court, the damage had already been done. 3 lives taken, a family erased, and an entire community left trying to understand how it happened. Because Nicholas Prosper didn't just wake up one morning and decide to kill. His descent was slow, fueled by isolation, violent online content, and an obsession that blurred the lines between reality and fiction. A boy who barely existed in the real world until the day he made sure everyone knew his name. And when the dust settled, what remained was yet another story of a mind lost to the darkest corners of the internet. A mystery in how it began. A horror in how it ended.
We'll return after these messages.
Privacy online is more important than ever. Whether you're browsing, streaming, or just trying to keep your data secure, your information is constantly being tracked. That's where today's sponsor, Private Internet Access, comes in. I use PIA because I spend a lot of time researching some sketchy corners of the internet, and I need to know my connection's secure. But it's also great for streaming. Since I'm in the UK, I can connect to a US server and unlock content I wouldn't normally have access to. And if you're in the US, you can do the same. Want to watch Friends on Netflix? Just switch to a UK server. Without a VPN, it's like paying for a Michelin star meal and only getting the kids' menu. With PIA, you get access to the full spread. It works on Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, even Linux, and one subscription covers unlimited devices. Right now, you can get 83% off, bringing it down to just $2.03 a month, plus 4 extra months for free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's zero risk in trying it out. Click the link in the description to get started, and thanks to PIA for sponsoring this video.
東京高田の馬場で動画配信中の女性が刺殺された事件で
On the morning of March 11th, 2025, a live stream quietly began on the Japanese platform WhoWatch. The streamer, Airi Sato, was walking through the streets of Shinjuku, broadcasting to her audience in real time. According to viewers, she was discussing a trip along the Yamanote line, one of Tokyo's busiest train routes. It was the kind of stream she had done many times before. But this time, something was different. Roughly 15 minutes in, Airi suddenly stopped speaking. Then came the screaming. To the more than 6,500 people tuned in, it was unclear what had just happened. But within the hour, news would begin to spread across Tokyo, and what those thousands of viewers had just seen, without even realizing it, was someone's final broadcast. Very little is known about Airi Sato's life outside of the internet. She was 22 years old, a live streamer, someone who, according to fans, had been creating content since high school. Her streams weren't polished, they weren't scripted. Most of the time, she was just walking around Tokyo, talking to the camera, sharing her thoughts. That was it. And people loved her for it. By early 2025, she had more than 2,600 followers on the streaming platform WhoWatch, and was known for her charm, her consistency, and her ability to keep people engaged. One of them was a man named Kenichi Takano. He was 42 years old, living in Tochigi Prefecture, and by the time he started watching Airi's streams in 2021, he was nearly 40. She had just turned 18. They eventually met in person, at a bar where she was working. It wasn't unusual. In Japan, it's common for live streamers to cross-promote with cafes, clubs, or bars. It's part of the culture. But their relationship didn't end there. Over time, Takano became more than just a viewer. He became someone Airi would turn to for help, and soon, their conversations moved off-platform. Screenshots later leaked from private messages show Airi asking Takano for money, often. Small amounts at first, a forgotten wallet, a co-worker's birthday, a bottle of champagne she said she was pressured into buying. But as the months went on, the requests got bigger, and the excuses got harder to believe. At one point, she told him her sister was being threatened over unpaid debt, that she might be forced into sex work if it wasn't resolved. In another message, she said she had vomited blood and thought it might be cancer. Eventually, she asked for 1 million yen, just under $7,000. By the end, Takano claimed he'd lent her over 2.5 million yen, more than $16,000. He told friends he'd taken out loans to cover it, that he believed she would pay him back. But she didn't. He took her to court, and in December 2023, a civil judgment was issued in his favor. Airi never showed. She never paid. According to one viewer, she later spoke about the situation during a live stream, admitting she had borrowed money from a listener, but claimed his messages had become awful, so she blocked him. After that, Takano said he had no way to reach her. In January 2024, he contacted local police and spoke to a lawyer, saying Airi had gone missing following the ruling, but nothing ever came of it. Then, one day, a notification popped up. Airi was going live. She was walking the Yamanote line. And that's when Takano decided he wasn't going to wait anymore. It was just after 9:45 a.m. on March 11th, 2025. Airi Sato was live streaming on Who Watch as she walked through the streets of Shinjuku Ward. She was alone, talking casually to the camera. Roughly 6,500 people were watching. Her stream had been titled 11th of March, Walking Around the Yamanote Line. Kenichi Takano had been watching. He had been following her movements, and when he caught up with her, he attacked. Witnesses described a man in a black cap and face mask sprinting toward Airi, attacking her live on air. The stream didn't cut right away. For nearly a minute, viewers heard her screaming. Some thought it was a prank. Others didn't know what they were hearing. Then, the camera moved. In a moment that no one watching could fully process, the attacker appeared on screen. Expressionless, almost in a state of shock. "Are you dead yet?" he asked. And then, silence. The stream went black. What followed was confusion, panic. Viewers flooded the chat with messages. But help wouldn't come from the screen. It was already too late. The live stream would abruptly be cut short. When police arrived at the scene, they found Airi lying on the floor, motionless. A 5-inch hunting knife was recovered nearby. Another was still in Takano's bag. He was standing just a few feet away, calm, silent, and according to witnesses, he never tried to run. Some see a young woman taken too soon. Others see a manipulator who finally ran out of options. What's not in question is what she did. She lied. She used him. She took advantage of someone she knew wasn't thinking clearly. But that doesn't mean she deserved what happened. She should have faced consequences. She should have been made to pay him back. Maybe even jailed. But not killed. Not like that. And Takano, whatever his mental state, made a choice he can't take back. Her final moments weren't private. They were content. And no one watching knew what they were seeing. Until it was already too late. There's something uniquely unsettling about online chat rooms. They're built on anonymity. No names, no faces. Just strangers talking in the dark. For decades, they've existed quietly in the background of the internet. Barely moderated, barely noticed. A place where anything could happen. And then, there was Coco. A chat platform based in France, open to anyone. No registration, no history, no rules. For years, it operated in the shadows, until police started noticing a pattern, one that was hard to ignore. And eventually, that pattern would unravel into one of the most disturbing criminal cases the country has ever seen. Coco was launched quietly in 2003 by a young software engineer named Isaac Steidel. It was just a simple, free chat room platform that didn't ask for much. You'd land on the homepage, choose a username, type in your age, and within seconds you were inside. From there, users could enter public forums sorted by topic, or slip into private conversations with anyone they chose. And while the site asked for your age, it didn't really matter. You could change it at any point, along with your username, and vanish into a different room with no trace. Many of the forums had mature themes. Some were centered around specific interests, while others focused on dating and relationships. But what made Coco different from other platforms wasn't just the content. It was the complete absence of oversight. There was no moderation, no logs. Messages disappeared within hours, and the platform kept moving. It never reached mainstream popularity, but it became well known to people monitoring online abuse. Child safety groups had been tracking it for years. LGBTQ+ advocates raised concerns about harassment and hate speech. And in France, the non-profit ACPE began using Coco in training sessions, showing how the site was being exploited by predators in real time. By 2024, Authorities had linked nearly 23,000 criminal procedures to the platform. But long before it was shut down, one case had already revealed what Coco was capable of. A case that lasted nearly a decade. One that was only possible because this platform existed. At the center of it was a user who frequented the chat site under the name Ason Insu. Translated from French, it means without her knowledge. For years, they would regularly post in one of Coco's adult forums, describing what seemed to be a recurring fantasy. According to the posts, the man and his wife engaged in a particular type of roleplay, where she would remain unaware of other participants being involved. He presented it as a consensual, private arrangement between two adults exploring a shared interest. But the truth was much darker. The man behind the account was Dominique Pellicot, an electrician living in the town of Mazan. And what he described online wasn't fiction. It was a plan. Between July 2011 and October 2020, Pellicot used sedatives to render his wife unconscious and brought strangers from Coco into their home. She had no awareness of what was happening, no memory, no ability to consent. Over the span of 9 years, at least 83 men entered that house. 72 of them took part in what Pellicot had orchestrated. In total, she was subjected to this abuse 92 times, and every act was recorded. Some of the men would later claim they believed it was all a fantasy, that Giselle had agreed beforehand. But in multiple conversations, Pellicot made himself clear. He used explicit language. He described the substances involved. He explained exactly what they were walking into. And for years, nothing stopped him. Dominique Pellicot used the platform freely, openly, and for nearly a decade. And the only reason he was ever caught had nothing to do with Coco. On the 12th of September 2020, Dominique Pellicot was arrested after a security guard saw him secretly recording women at a supermarket near Mazan. At first, police seized his phone. Then, after a search of his home, they collected his laptop and several USB drives. He was released pending further investigation. When officers examined the devices, they found a folder named Abuses. Inside were over 20,000 images and videos of his wife. All of the evidence was there. File names included dates and the identities of those involved. Eventually, investigators were able to trace the network back to Coco. Police later identified 50 of the men involved. The evidence stretched far beyond what anyone expected. Files on Pellicot's computer included footage of his daughter-in-law taken in secret, and even inappropriate images of his own daughter. After years of investigation, the trial began in September 2024. Dominique Pellicot stood alongside 50 other defendants, all charged in connection with the abuse. The trial lasted for months. On the 19th of December, the verdicts were delivered. All were found guilty. Dominique received the maximum sentence allowed under French law, 20 years in prison. The remaining defendants received varying sentences, ranging from 3 to 15 years, depending on the charges and the extent of their involvement. The case became one of the most widely reported trials in France in recent memory, not only because of what had happened, but because of how long it went undetected. But it was only by chance that any of it came to light. In June 2024, Coco was shut down for good. After years of warnings, investigations, and criminal cases, the site finally went offline. This wasn't a dark web forum. It wasn't hidden or encrypted. It was a publicly accessible chat site. And for nearly a decade, it enabled one of the most horrific cases of abuse in recent history, all in plain sight. It's easy to look at a platform like Coco and wonder how it was ever allowed to exist. But the truth is, it wasn't unique. There are countless sites just like it, unmoderated, anonymous, designed to erase history within hours. These places don't create the people who use them, but they give them space, they give them cover, And for people like Dominique Pellicot, that's all they ever needed. This is the reality of the internet's darkest spaces. It's not just where strange stories live. Sometimes, it's where the worst ones begin. Thanks again to Private Internet Access. Stay secure online with the link below.